E.N.D here. If you have carefully read the release notes for Murders at Call of Manor, I will leave a link in the description below. You should be aware that the mechanic Suspend received a significant update and a rule change. Now, you are no longer required to cast the Suspended card as the second triggered ability of Suspend resolves. Instead, as the second triggered ability resolves, you may cast the card. If you don't cast the card, it remains exiled with no time counters on it and it's no longer suspended. Suspend is a keyword that represents three abilities. The first is a static ability that allows you to exile the card from your hand with the specified number of time counters on it by paying its suspended cost. The second is a triggered ability that removes a time counter from the suspended card at the beginning of each of your upkeeps. The third is a triggered ability that causes you to cast the card when the last time counter is removed. If you cast a creature this way, it gains haste until you lose control of that creature. Suspend lets a player save mana on casting spells by committing to surviving many turns in advance. If one is uncertain on making all their land drops, Suspend helps the player use their mana otherwise. However, many Suspend cards are designed to be overwhelming or risky when the opponent has prior warning. But how do you play Suspend? Let's build our battlefield and let's suspend two cards. Not cast, suspend. Ancestral Vision and Crushing Footfalls. Ancestral Vision and Crushing Footfalls have suspend 4 by paying 1 blue and 1 green mana respectively. When you suspend a spell, you are not casting it. Very important, you are not casting it. Therefore, it will not go on the stack, no stack, and your opponents cannot counter or respond. When Ancestral Vision and Crushing Footfalls hits the exile, I will put 4 time counters on them. At the beginning of my upkeep, I will remove a time counter. Upkeep 1, 1 time counter. Upkeep 2, 2 time counters. Upkeep 3, 3 time counters. Upkeep 4, last time counter. When the last time counter is removed, I can cast the suspended spell. Prior to the rule change, I had to cast the suspended spell. Now I have an option. I can cast the suspended spell or I can choose not to cast the spell. If I choose not to cast the spell, it will remain in exile with no time counters on it and is no longer considered as suspended. In my case, let's say that my library is short, especially if I'm playing against a mill player and I don't want to draw 3 cards. At the same time, I don't want to give my opponent 3 cards. Therefore, I'm going to choose to cast Crushing Footfalls and create 2 Rhinos tokens 4/4, and I'm not going to cast Ancestral Vision. Ancestral Vision will remain in exile indefinitely and with no time counters on it. I cannot cast it anymore. Very important, you cannot cast it anymore or you cannot cast it in any other turn. If you choose not to cast a suspended spell, you cannot cast it anymore. In case of Crushing Footfalls, I decided to cast it. Any suspended card that is casted without paying any mana cost, it will go on the stack. There can be a counter, there can be response. If nothing happens, the spell resolves and the 2 4/4 Rhino creature tokens are created. Some notes. The phrase, if you could cast this card from your hand, checks only for timing restrictions and permission. This includes both what inherent in the card's type. For example, if the card with suspend is a creature, it must be your main phase and the stack must be empty. And what's imposed by other abilities such as Flesh or Meddling Mage ability. Whether you could follow all the steps in playing the card is irrelevant if the card is impossible to cast due to a lack of legal target or an unplayable mana cost. For example, it may still be exiled with Suspend. Exiling a card with its Suspend ability, it's not casting that card. This action doesn't use the stack and can't be responded to. If a spell with Suspend has targets, the targets are chosen when the spell is cast, not when it's exiled. If the first triggered ability of Suspend is countered, no time counter is removed. The ability will trigger again during its owner's next upkeep. When the last time counter is removed from a suspended card, the second triggered ability of Suspend will trigger. It doesn't matter why the time counter was removed or whose effect removed it. If the second triggered ability of Suspend is countered, the card can be cast. It remains in the exile zone without any time counters on it for the rest of the game, and it's no longer considered suspended. If the second triggered ability of Suspend resolves, the card's owner may cast the spell if possible. Normal timing considerations for the spell are ignored. For example, if the suspended card is a creature and this ability resolves during your upkeep, you are able to cast the card, but other play restrictions are not ignored. If the second triggered ability of Suspend resolves and the suspended card can't be cast, or you don't want to cast it due to a lack of legal targets or a cast restriction, for example, it remains in the exile zone without any time counters on it for the rest of the game and no longer considered suspended. As the second triggered ability of Suspend resolves, if casting the suspended card involves an additional cost, the card's owner must pay that cost if able, if they want to cast that card. A creature cast via Suspend enters the battlefield with haste. It still has haste after the first turn it's on the battlefield as long as the same player controls it. As soon as another player takes control of it, it loses haste. So that's how you play Suspend with the new rule. Leave me a comment below, what do you think about this rule change? And as always, subscribe to my channel for more and more interesting videos about Magic the Gathering and the collectible world.